What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today is another edition of the Rogue Deck Workshop. And today we are going to be looking at Dalakos, Crafter of Wonders, and see what we can do with this guy in Standard. And I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if you're thinking, wait a minute, Dalakos is all about equipment. So why in the world would we try to build an equipment deck in a format that has almost no good equipment right now? And, well, there are a couple of reasons for that, and not the least of which is the fact that Nahiri, Heir of the Ancients, is going to be coming out in Zendikar Rising. So what Nahiri tells us, she is a very loud signpost saying that there's going to be a lot of cool equipment synergies coming in the future. And so what I want to do is build a deck that leverages the colors of these two characters. And so we'd be looking at Jeskai. So we'd be looking at red, white, and blue. So Murica. And we're going to be building a deck based around the equipment and Dalakos, with the understanding that once Zendikar Rising comes out, we will no doubt get a lot of other cool artifacts, and so we'll have an opportunity to upgrade this deck with the new equipment that comes in, and not to mention Nahiri herself is going to slot in really nicely. And so I have a lot of thoughts on how we're going to go ahead and build this thing, and let's go ahead and get into it right now. All right, so as you can see, we have the blank slate that we love to start with. Let's go ahead and select our format. I'm going to go ahead and click Standard. And I understand that while we're looking at just Standard, we are going to be seeing some equipment and some other cards that are going to be rotating out. Because the plan is to upgrade this deck when Zendikar comes out, I'm not going to be as worried about making sure that this is rotation proof. I'm going to try, but at the same time, for example, the mana fixing, we might include the shock lands, because we know that Zendikar Rising is going to be bringing us dual lands, and so the goal of this deck is to basically be a rough draft of a Zendikar Jeskai equipment deck, which is kind of weird given that we haven't seen any of the Zendikar cards yet, but we're going to have some fun with it. So let's go ahead and first and foremost, let's grab Dalakos. I'm going to throw 4 Dalakos in there right now, just because let's cut the nonsense. Let's get them in. And then the next thing I want to do is find as many equipment as we can. So, okay, the first thing that I'm seeing a lot of white equipment. Okay, and that makes sense because white and red are very equipment heavy colors, so I'm not super surprised. We also have Mantle of Tides in blue, which could be a cool way to protect Dalakos by making it a little bit bigger, but at the same time, drawing cards is the synergy there. So if you're not familiar, Mantle of Tides, the equipped creature gets +1/+2, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, attach Mantle of Tides to target creature you control. So if we're going to be drawing multiple cards, Mantle of Tides could be useful. I don't know if we're going to be doing that, though, so we can go ahead and put a pin in that. Then let's go ahead and scroll on over. Malefic Scythe is awesome if our creatures are going to be dying, but I don't know that we want our creatures to be dying. So that's that. So with Dalakos specifically, let's go ahead and actually, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's take a look. Dalakos allows us to create 2 colorless mana, which we can use to spend on artifact spells or activate abilities on artifacts. So that's equipment effects. That's a lot of colorless equipment. Not to mention potentially artifact creatures, if there are any that are really worth putting in the deck. So that actually, he's a great little mana dork. And equipped creatures you control have flying and haste. So it gives all of our creatures flying and haste. So those are 2 effects that we don't necessarily need on the equipment itself. But at the end of the day, we need creatures and we need to be able to equip things to them. So let's see, Mask of Immolation. Now this has some potential, I think. So when it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 red elemental creature token with Mask of Immolation attached to it. And then equipped creature has sacrifice this creature, deals 1 damage to any target. So that's pretty fantastic. When Dalakos is online, Mask of Immolation, you create a 1/1 flying hasty elemental with the ability to sacrifice and ping something. So that actually could be a way of producing that last damage or 2, potentially, that we need to close out a game. And it creates elemental tokens, so it's creating creatures. Let's go ahead and throw Mask of Immolation in there. I feel like that's pretty solid. We can do something there. Let's see. We also have Crystal Slipper. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste. I'm a little bit hesitant to go there because it's not creating the creature token, and it's yeah, and it's granting haste, which is something that we don't necessarily need. Embercleave is money. We just need it. We just need Embercleave. Embercleave is just the single greatest piece of equipment that's in Standard right now, bar none, and we just need to have it. It's that simple. All right, so what else do we got? Tournament Grounds. actually I think could be fantastic. So tournament grounds, you get a red, white, and a black, but you can spend this mana only to cast knights or equipment spells. And so that's some mana fixing because we're gonna have a lot of colorless equipment just because we do. Colorless equipment is very, very common. And being able to produce white or red, but you can only cast it with knights or equipment spells. If we end up putting knights in the deck, which I think we will because there are some synergies with knights and equipment. So I feel like Tournament Grounds actually is pretty solid mana fixing. Let's go ahead and put that in there. Now, do we care about the black? Not necessarily. Because there's something like Giant Skewer in, I suppose, but I don't know that that makes a lot of sense. And adding a fourth color to the mix is probably not worth the juice is probably not worth the squeeze, as they say on that one. So this is basically it's a dual land. It's a Boros dual land, but it only for knights and equipment is basically what we have there. But it comes into play untapped. That's a very important note. Definitely something worth throwing out there. Steel Call Lance actually could be worth it. Let's see. The equipped creature gets +2/+2, and you can equip a knight for 1. And then you can equip a non-knight for 3. So if we wanted to equip Dalakos, we could actually tap Dalakos and then one of our lands to equip it. So that's not the end of the world. It's actually not terrible. I don't know that we want to have more mana fixing for black, though. So again, I don't know that we want 4 colors in here. All right, let's keep on looking. Actually, let's see. What do we have here? Colossus Hammer. A Colossus Hammer is fantastic. It's going to be rotating out, but it is a super fun card. It does equip for 8, however. And so once we have access to Nahiri, maybe a version of this in Historic is going to have Colossus Hammer in it because Nahiri allows you to auto-equip something to a creature token she creates, and that could be really disgusting and beautiful. But with this deck, we'd have to pay the cost. It might be reduced, but we would still have to pay it, and that's an awfully steep cost. I'm going to go ahead and throw 1 in, though, just because in the rare situation, so this card is situational, I think, because we're going to have cost reducers on board as well as enough mana to actually equip it, and in a perfect world, we're not going to get that late in a game, but if we do, Colossus Hammer could deliver the power that we need to close it out. So I'll go ahead and add that in for now. So Screaming Shield, quick creature gets +0/+3 and has pay 2 tap. Target player mills 3 cards. We're not going to be milling, so we don't want that. Shadow Spear is also fantastic. I'm going to throw 4 Shadow Spears in here just because it's great. Let's see, Short Sword. It's also, like, I feel like Short Sword is just really solid. It drops for 1, equips for 1, so we can actually tap Dalakos to equip this thing, to play it and equip it to whatever we want. And equip creatures +1/+1 is very straightforward, very simple, but it does the job. This right here is just a very quick and easy way to get a creature equipped so we can lift it off with Dalakos. So I feel like this Short Sword has haste and wings on it, so I think that's pretty good, actually. It's cheap enough, so it gives us what we need. Heart Piercer Bow. Whenever a equipped creature attacks, Heart Piercer Bow deals 1 damage to target creature defending player controls. That also seems pretty great. Unfortunately, it is rotating out yet again, so we are going to be swapping Heart Piercer Bow. We're going to be swapping Heart Piercer Bow out once Zendikar Rising shows up, but that's okay. I feel like for right now, that card is fantastic. Let's go ahead and use it. All right, Marauder's Axe. I feel like Marauder's equipped creature is +2/+0. There's a card called Bone Crusher from back in Mirrodin, which was the very first set where equipment showed up, that cost 1 to play, and I think it was 1 to equip, to give a creature +2/+0. And it was really good. I feel like Marauder's Axe is just a really crappy Bone Crusher. So I'd rather we keep moving. I think it was called Bone Crusher. Bone Splitter? I think it was Bone Splitter. Never mind. Bone Crusher is the giant. That's the one I'm getting that confused. Mirror Shield has some interesting applications. So it costs 2. Equipped creature gets +0/+2, has hexproof, and whenever a creature with Death Touch blocks or becomes blocked by this creature, destroy that creature. So our opponent needs to have Death Touchers for this to really be effective, but it does give hexproof. So that does protect. If we want to go Voltron, where we have 1 creature that has a bunch of equipment on it, Mirror Shield would be fantastic. I think, though, because Dalakos' ability doesn't stack, and because we have Embercleave in here, I want to go as wide as humanly possible. I want as many creatures, each with 1 equipment on them, as possible. And so I don't think that hexproof is going to be quite as useful. However, if we're going up against Death Touchers, it could be great. So I'm going to go ahead and toss those in the sideboard. Mirror Shield. Pretty solid. And then Wings of Hubris, equipped creature gets flying, and then you could sacrifice Wings of Hubris to make the creature unblockable, but then you have to sacrifice it at the end step. Wings of Hubris, it's clearly what Dalakos, Crafter of Wonders, is working on here, although actually the wings he's working on look a lot nicer than those. But in general, no. Sorry, Icarus, we're not touching it. All right, so now we need creatures. We did already identify that knights actually work really nicely with tournament grounds, and there's some other synergies that we can access with knights. And so let's go ahead and look at that. I'm going to go ahead and filter just down on Jeskai. So we have Venerable Knight, rock solid. You see this card a lot in White Weenie strategies today. It's just a 2/1 for 1. When it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on target knight you control. That's excellent, actually, at 1 drop. So let's go ahead and throw those in there. Worthy Knight. I think Worthy Knight is actually going to be critical for us. Whenever you cast a Knight spell, create a 1/1 white human creature token. Well, because the Knight synergies is nice to some degree, but at the end of the day, we just need creatures on board. I think Worthy Knight is a fantastic way to go super duper wide. And I'm also noticing that we already have 57 cards in this deck, so we are going to have to narrow this down. And I'm aware of that, but right now, for the initial draft sake, I'm going to grab as many cards that I think could be useful, and then we'll tune it from there. All right, Youthful Knight, 2/1 First Striker for 2, not bad, especially since we're going to be buffing it with equipment. So that could be good, but let's keep on looking. What else we got? Bosri's Lieutenant, protection from multicolor. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever it or another creature you control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter, create a Knight token. That actually could be solid. The one thing that gives me a little bit of pause with Bosri's Lieutenant, excuse me, is that the one thing that gives me pause with Bosri's Lieutenant is the fact that it's a 4-drop. We want a lot of creatures, and so I'm a little bit hesitant on spending that much on one of our creatures. Because I want to, ideally later in the game, we're going to be spending we're going to be casting multiple knights, is ultimately what I would like to be doing near the late game. Fervent Champion, slam dunk, home run, absolutely get in this deck. So Fervent Champion is a 1/1 for 1 first strike haste, which if you've been playing on Arena, you've seen this guy. He has smacked you on turn 0 before. That just is how it works. It's got first strike haste. Whenever Fervent Champion attacks, another target attacking knight you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Awesome. And then equip abilities you activate that target Fervent Champion cost 3 less to activate. That is a clause on Fervent Champion that is often forgotten because it does so many other great things. But equipments are cheaper when they're targeting Fervent Champion, and that's great. So we can basically, given the equipments that we found, they basically all equip for 0 if they're equipping to a Fervent Champion. So that's fantastic. We definitely want that in here. All right, so then we have removal in the form of Joust, could be solid. Ember's Shieldbreaker is also a really solid addition because it can destroy target artifacts. I'm actually going to go ahead and toss that in the sideboard. If we're going up against artifact strategies like Temur Clover, Ember's Shieldbreaker is fantastic because we can break because the Clover is really where that deck pops off. There's a reason people call it Temur Clover, not Temur Adventures, although people call it Temur Adventures too. But at the end of the day, if we can break those, then we're in good shape. Same is true with the sacrifice decks, which are less popular now that Cauldron Familiar got banned, but it's still out there. And so the Rakdos sacrifice decks with the Witch's Oven, being able to smash ovens is really important. So Ember's Shieldbreaker in the sideboard, I think, is a home run because it's also a 2/1 knight for 2. So that's going to trigger our Worthy Knight, and it's a creature that we can equip and do fun things to. Fun things with, rather. Let's go ahead and take a look what else. Raging Redcap is intriguing. 1/2 for 3. Solid option. But again, it's kind of expensive. Then Circare the Bold. Let's see. Whenever Circare the Bold or an instant or sorcery you control deals damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card. It's card draw. It's card draw. Let's go ahead and put 1 in there because I feel like she's solid. Then you can tap, deal 1 damage to any target. So if it's late in the game and we need to dig, let's go ahead and put 2 in the sideboard, because if we're going up against a control deck, having a powerful ability later in the game that can draw some cards could be really useful. So I feel like she's a solid include. Maybe not a slam dunk home run, but not bad. Stormfist Crusader, if we were interested in splashing black here, then depending on the mana fixing in Zendikar is really whether or not Stormfist Crusader and Steelclaw Lance are worth including. For this case, I'm going to go ahead and say no. I'm going to shy away from them. Let's see, Sky Knight Vanguard. Whenever Sky Knight Vanguard attacks, so Sky Knight Vanguard is a knight, member of the Boros Legion according to the art, which is cool. Whenever Sky Knight Vanguard attacks, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token that's tapped and attacking. That's exactly the kind of thing we want to do. It's in the colors that we want, and it's got flying. Unfortunately, let's go ahead and craft those. Yep. So unfortunately, Sky Knight Vanguard is going to be rotating. Still worth an uncommon wildcard though, because it's just great. And so this is a creature that we're going to be having to rotate out once Zendikar shows up. But again, this deck is going to need quite a bit of tuning come Zendikar. But I feel like we can find, given that there's going to be equipment, it looks like the core are going to have synergies with equipment, which is a creature type that that lives on Zendikar. So given that, I suspect this deck might actually shift away from Knights completely come Zendikar. So as a result, I'm not as worried about tossing in a 2-drop Knight that produces tokens. Yeah, I feel like we ought to include that. All right, and so here we have the bones of this deck. A couple of things I'm noticing. You might notice, wait a minute, Dalakos and Embercleave and Shadowspear are all rare. So why in the world do we have, while they are rare, that's not what I meant. They're legendary. So why are we including 4 copies of them? Because generally, I know my general rule is if I want to see an individual card, then I'm going to put 3. Like if I want to see a card once per game, but only once per game, and I don't want duplicates, I generally pick 3 in my decks. But in this case, I'm putting 4 because we have almost no card draw. The only real card draw that we have is Circara, and like I mentioned, or Kara, I'm not exactly sure how this character pronounces it, but that's the only real card draw that we have, and even then, it's an impulsive card draw, so we can't really count on it. So I don't want to depend on card draw to hit the cards that we really, really need. Meanwhile, Embercleave wins games. It just wins games, and I want full confidence that we are going to hit Embercleave. Same is true with Shadowspear. It's going to provide a ton of value by giving trample and lifelink, not to mention a power toughness boost, and with Dalakos online, it's also going to give flying and haste. So that is just keyword soup, and it's phenomenal for its cost. And the fact that you can pay 1 and force your opponent's stuff to lose indestructible and hexproof, I mean, it's just crazy good. It's like unreal how good this is compared to everything else. So we need to thin this down a little bit. Mask of Immolation, I like, but and same is true with Dalakos, because the deck is built around Dalakos. We need Dalakos in order for the whole thing to pop off, so let's go ahead and keep him. Let's go ahead and make sure we have 4. So Embercleave is a 6-drop, but it's not actually a 6-drop. If everything lines up correctly, we're going to be paying 3 or 2 to cast Embercleave, so we can kind of ignore that as far as our curve is concerned. But I noticed this curve is very, very low, so we probably don't need a full 24 lands. And that's what we have right now. So let's go ahead and... Oh, actually, I haven't crafted our mana base. Shame on me. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. We do have a Triome at our disposal, so let's go ahead and throw that in there. And then we also have... We got to get some dual lands up in here. So let's go ahead and grab the Temple of Triumph, just because we have a lot of we have a lot of white and red, so we want to really have plenty of those. And let's go ahead and grab the Shocks while we're here. And again, when Zendikar comes out, we're going to replace these. So let's go ahead and then also grab Steam Vents. And last but not least, the Hollowed Fountain. Excellent. So this is a pretty greedy mana base. We got no basics whatsoever, but I feel like that's okay. And like I said, we also don't need a full 24 of them. So let's go ahead and thin it down a little bit. We'll go down to 3 Hollowed Fountains, because the blue is only for Dalakos. Dalakos is the only blue we have in here, so I want to make sure that we have access to it, but at the same time, we don't need... Actually, you know what? The more I look at it, if we're allowing ourselves to have access to the past lands, or to the Ravnica lands, let's go ahead and get... I don't think we need training grounds. Or tournament grounds, rather. All right, and so with that, actually, let's go ahead and add back another Hollowed Fountain. And so now we have 20 lands, which might actually not be bad for what we're trying to do. But I'd like one more. I'd like to have 21. Given how low our curve is, I feel like we can actually thrive on that. So let's go ahead and... we already have all of those. We already have Steam Vents, but let's go ahead and grab let's grab 1 Temple of Epiphany. All right, cool. So now we have 21 lands, and we have access to 63 cards now. And I'm sure you're wondering, wait, why 21 lands? Well, and because our average is only 2.1, a full 24 lands is going to lead to mana flooding more often than not, and we definitely want to avoid that. Why 21 specifically? To be honest, I'm mostly intuiting that based on what we're looking at. I know there are mathematical formulas out there and tools online all over the place on how to determine what's an optimal mana base. But in this case, I'm just taking a look based on my experience. I feel like 21 would be pretty good here. You could also probably go 22. That wouldn't be bad. But I know a full 24 or anything higher than that would be way too much. And so that's why we're going 21, and we'll see how it works. And so we do need to cut things down a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and remove that Colossus Hammer. It's fun. I like it, but I don't think it's going to be that useful here. And then let's see. Mask of Immolation is also not wonderful, so we'll go down by 1. We'll have 3 in there. And ultimately, I want to err on the side of having less equipment, which I know is going to be a little bit of a bummer with Dalakos because we want to have as much equipment as possible, but without creatures, we can't win the game at all. So I really want to focus on making sure we have enough creatures and then can get some equipment on them. Also, there are going to be some games where this is just a Knight equipment deck and Dalakos doesn't hit the field at all, in which case we're going to be a little bit bummed because Dalakos is a powerhouse that can really help pump what we're doing. But at the same time, if that happens, we need to have enough firepower to actually win a game. And so things like Sky Knight Vanguard and Worthy Knight are going to help us do that. So I feel like those are just necessary. And then Mask of Immolation, yeah, I mean, it does create that token, which is pretty darn nice. And the mask itself, like I said, also, we can chuck our tokens away and use excess mana late in the game to deal enough damage to our opponent's face to actually win it. So I like Mask of Immolation as a kind of a backup plan. Yeah, actually, I realized, now that I look at it, Mask of Immolation and Weaponize the Monsters are very similar. Because this has equip 2, and then you can sacrifice the creature to deal 1 damage. Where Weaponize the Monsters, it's an enchantment that at any time you can pay 2, sacrifice a creature, and it deals 2 damage. Okay, so Weaponize is actually a little bit better, but at the end of the day, you're paying 2, sacrificing a creature, and dealing damage as a direct result. But in this case, Mask of Immolation synergizes with what we're doing in other ways. But it's cool. That's an interesting similarity. That's a design space that the Wizards is clearly tinkering with, and I like that. All right. So we need to make one more cut. And I suppose cutting 1 short sword is probably not going to hurt anything. All right, cool. I like it. And then for our sideboard, not Castle Ardenvale. I mean, you're not bad, but that's not what we're going for. When in doubt, Grafdigger's Cage in the sideboard to mess up graveyard strategies. And then, there's actually let's see. Heliod's Intervention also is really powerful in the sideboard, so let's go ahead and throw 2 of those in there. Yeah, 3 Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Heliod's Intervention, Ember's Shieldbreaker, and then Mirror Shield. So yeah, I feel like this is pretty solid. And then more Circaras, so then if we're going up against control, Circara and Mirror Shield can slot in. I've said it before on other videos, sideboarding is possibly my weak spot, so, that's definitely a rough draft sideboard. If you have any suggestions for other cards that we should include in the deck or specifically the sideboard, please leave them in the comments below. And while you're there, if you could press like and subscribe, that'd be fantastic. All right, so we need to go ahead and give this deck a name. Right, and I can't do it from there for some reason. All right, Dalakos, Crafter of Knights. Is that too long? Don't think so. Excellent. Cool. So we have a Dalakos Knights deck. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen. We have put it together. And if you enjoy this video, we do have a number of other videos that are very similar. This is actually number 6 in the Rogue Deck Workshop series. So there's going to be one of those flashing up on your screen shortly. There's also a full playlist on YouTube if you want to see other videos like this. And then I'm also going to put together a gameplay video. There's going to be a link for that as well showing up on that end screen. So thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate you. This has been another edition of the Rogue Deck Workshop. I've been HamHawks42 on the internet. You can also catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/HamHawks42. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You are a good person, and you deserve to be happy.